welcome everybody to Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate, a journey of emotional resilience. I'm your host, Brandon, and we have another great journey segment for you today. I'm very pleased and excited to welcome Vera to the show. So how are you doing today? I'm good, thank you. And we had a quick conversation the other day to kind of set this up, and it got me really interested in hearing your story and, using meditation and yoga to heal. So I'm really excited to share that with more people and hear kind of what led you to that and what got you through those rough times to where you're at today. So thank you so much for coming on and being vulnerable and sharing your journey with us.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And just to kind of go into it, where do you see the importance in sharing your experience? What do you think that does when we open up and share what we've been through and how we've gotten to where we are today?
I think the most important part is removing the shame from it. I dealt with my addiction by myself for so long because I was so scared to let people know. Like the only people that would know were the people who I did drugs with. And it was only recently, like when I finally got sober of alcohol and cannabis as well, that I started coming out with my story. Because I think even when I had gotten clean from the cocaine, I still felt like I was still addicted. Like there were still substances in my life that were causing harm. And so I felt, who am I to tell my story and to share my experiences? But now looking back, I'm like, that's kind of part of it, right? Like you don't have to be perfect in order to start telling people that they're not alone and that you understand what they're going through because you've been in the exact same place. Like even if our life circumstances are different, the feelings are the same. The emotions that we go through are the same. The things that lead us to addiction. It's the same kind of spiral, the same kind of stories that we tell ourselves. And so the most important thing is generating this sense of community and this sense of support for everyone around us.
Yeah, I love that. And I really like that you hit on the shame part of it, because I think that's what keeps us in those struggles for so long, is that we don't want to let people down, or we don't want to let people in and have them, change their point of view of us or feel less than or anything like that. So I think that's a huge part of it, is just showing. I really also liked what you said, where, it doesn't really matter where we come from, but a lot of the feelings and the emotions and what led us to that is the same. And I think the more we can share that, the more we can show people that, everybody has had struggles in their life. Everybody's dealt with these things. Doesn't matter that we don't look the same or that we're not from the same place. We can still relate and, not have to feel so isolated, shameful, and alone as we battle through those and as we try to get better. And I'm really interested, once we get to that point, though. I'd like that you talked about just the differentiation you had between getting clean from cocaine and then eventually finding that, letting go of alcohol and cannabis too. So I think that's something I thought about early in recovery, is wanting to go back to those things that are more socially acceptable and maybe don't seem as hard. So I'm really interested to hear your perspective and what led you to give that up as well. But was that something that you started early with, was substance use, or is that something you grew up around, that you saw a lot of in your life?
I mean, I grew up in a very traditional Chinese household, so I just wasn't allowed to do anything. But then I saw, all the cool kids in high school have these amazing parties, and they look like they're just having so much fun. And I just felt so outside of all of that, and I really wished I could be part of it. And so I think there was a lot of like making up for lost time once I was an adult, and thinking that I needed to be like those popular girls that I saw in order to be loved and accepted, and in order to have fun, really, because I didn't know how to have fun. Fun was not a value in my household growing up, right? It was like all about hard work and I guess proving yourself through accolades and accomplishments, whether that be work or school. And then not knowing where the in between of that was. Like there was this version of me that just wanted to make my parents really proud. And then there was this version of me that really wanted to live life. And then I thought that it had to like be at those two extremes.
Yeah, and with that, kind of growing up in that environment and having that, trying to decide where you want to go with that or what you should be living up to, whether that's your parents' expectations or, just wanting to enjoy life and have fun. Did you have like a lot of internal struggle or any other mental health issues, like kind of growing up in that environment and, dealing with that pressure at home, but then also seeing like, oh, I want to go to those parties. I want to let loose a little bit, but maybe not being able to really do that.
I mean, the major one was depression, right? And it goes back to what you said is feeling isolated. So this feeling of isolation is going to prompt the questions of why am I alone? What's wrong with me that I'm not like everybody else? And then what do I need to do to be like everybody else? It's like there's so many stories that we tell ourselves when we're suffering, right? And it's these beliefs that do the most harm because ultimately it's these beliefs that lead us to want to numb out. These feelings are incredibly hard to feel. So I think that's why if you don't deal with what's really going on inside you and what you're thinking about, these addictions can carry on for years and years and years because as long as you're numbing, you're not having to process it or to face it. And it becomes a very workable cycle. I wouldn't say effective, but
Yeah.
like somewhat effective. But I mean, I love that saying, like, addiction is when something almost works.
Mm.
Right? So you're constantly doing this, repeating the same behavior because it's almost working. And then you just got to chase it because the more you drink, the more you have to drink, the more you use, the more you have to use.
Yeah, I've actually never heard that saying, but I like it because just as you said that, I thought about that in my head and realized, yeah, it did almost work. There were so many moments where I thought I was getting better or I was doing better because I had numbed things or just ignored them for so long and covered them up and I thought they were gone and I didn't have to deal with them anymore. But you know, then it almost worked because, or then it didn't work because obviously the behaviors I was having and the choices I was making destroyed other aspects of my life. And then anytime I was coming down, all those emotions and feelings came back. So like you said, I had to chase it. I had to do more. I had to, get more. Um, I always had to keep doing more and more and more and more. And then everything would get more extreme. So I like that saying. I think that makes a lot of sense because that can keep us wanting to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
so as you were kind of searching for that and going through that, do you remember the first time you used it? And then what was that experience like when you were dealing with, some of those internal battles of wanting to be a part of, this group and then you finally do it? What was that experience like for you?
The first time I got really drunk was in Ireland. I had moved to Ireland for 4 months for summer. And this was also when I tried ecstasy for the first time and cocaine for the first time. Um, the first time I got drunk in a bar, I like made out with this guy. And I just felt like so powerful because never in a million, like I was so quiet and shy, and then all of a sudden
Mm.
alcohol just gave me this like courage to be this like sexy, powerful woman. It's like, who is she? I need more of that. So I thought, alcohol was the answer, right? And then of course it escalates from there because after the 10th time of drinking, it's not as fun as the first time.
Mm.
And then somebody introduced me to ecstasy, and it was the first time that I danced all night in my entire life. And I was like, I didn't know I could dance. And so I was like, I definitely want more of that. And then towards the end of the summer, it escalated to cocaine. So it's just like one thing led to another, right? Like you always want to chase like the next high, the better high, um, something slightly more badass than the last thing that you did. Um, and the first time I did cocaine, I was just like, oh my God, am I in a movie? Like, I didn't think that I ever would, I guess. I always thought it was just something that I would see in a movie. Um, so yeah, the first time that I did cocaine was the best feeling that I had ever felt in my life. And then I just was asking everybody after that if they had any. Um, and then that was the rest of my next 14 years was just chasing this one thing and this one feeling.
Yeah, and that's what's what you just said. That's what's scary about some of those drugs is that, especially that first time, nothing feels better, and that's what
Mhm.
we end up looking for and trying to get every single time, which doesn't quite ever match up to that first high. But going into that first experience of like feeling shy and feeling isolated, and then like you just said that little story about being at the bar and feeling like this sexy powerful woman, and that's you attributed that to the alcohol and giving you that confidence to do it. Did you immediately then like kind of fall in love with that feeling because it was able to bring out this different side of you that you were happy with and that you were excited about?
Oh, of course. Of course. Like it seemed like it opened an entire new gateway of possibilities that I didn't think um, I would ever get to have based on, the experiences of high school
Mhm.
and how isolated and lonely and, like I said, all the negative self-beliefs that formed. So I thought that was just something that I would get to see other people have. I didn't think I would get to participate. And then when I did get to participate, then the story that I told myself was, well, it's not because of you, it's because of who you are when you're high or drunk.
I can relate to that so much because I was always growing up. I just remember always being shy, withheld, self conscious, and that that first moment where I started drinking and smoking, um, it took all that away. I wasn't in my own head anymore. I felt like I could actually talk to people and have fun and just forget all those negative feelings I had on the inside. And I think that can
Yeah.
really draw us in to that. And then,
Mm-hmm.
so was that all one summer for you, going from alcohol to ecstasy to cocaine? Was that like all
Yeah.
together from doing nothing to that
Yeah.
within a couple of months?
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you, besides that feeling of like being in a movie, because sometimes when we grow up in those environments where we're not around drugs like that, then it can feel like that experience, like, whoa, this is not something I ever expected to be around. Um, did you realize, like, was there a moment early on where you thought, wow, this escalated quickly?
Um, I think I was just drinking so much, like probably 5 days a week. So I don't think I was thinking like this escalated quickly. I just wanted to keep escalating. Like I wanted it. Like I said, it was making up for lost time. Um, yeah, I think the feeling of being wanted is more addictive than the drug itself.
Do you think when you were in those environments, is that what like made you feel wanted? Is being high and being drunk and feeling, comfortable being around people? Did that make you feel just more accepted and more included and more wanted, like you just said?
That, and it also gave me the audacity to be a version of myself that probably has already always existed within me, but I never had the guts to express it. So, yeah, like just the way that I was, the way that I talked, the way that I was fearless, that all came with the drugs and the alcohol. I mean, I was like 19 or 20, right? So I was experiencing versions of myself that I didn't even know had existed until then.
I think that is really powerful. What you just said too is that feeling of something coming out of you never knew you had, and when you attribute
Mm-hmm.
that coming out to the alcohol or drugs, and you're like, oh, this is the only way I get this out of me. This is the only way I get to have this confidence or this fearlessness to live life. And
Mm-hmm.
and I like that you said that feeling is almost more addictive than the drugs, because that's what
Mm-hmm.
I loved. Like I just I remember not liking myself for so long growing up. When I finally felt like I was liking myself and I was happy with myself, it was it was great. It was the best feeling that I could have had, and so I think that's so powerful and so relatable to why we get into it and then why we can fall in love with it. Especially if we've had those negative feelings about ourselves for so long. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so you were in Ireland. Did you then go home, and was it hard to
Yeah.
find, or were you able to kind of put yourself back in that environment, or did it kind of slow down and then pick back up eventually?
I went home and like this guy that I had met at a coffee shop right before I left, he and I had stayed in touch and he was like kind of like head over heels for me. And um when I came back, I was very upfront with him. I was like, these are all my experiences and he's like, oh my God, you've changed so much. But like it excited him
Mm.
because before I left, I was more like a good girl and I wouldn't even smoke weed with him. And then all of a sudden I came back and I was this girl that would like be into anything. And I guess he saw it as an opportunity. Um, so yeah, he provided me with all of the drugs and we fell into a relationship very quickly because I'm just always fucked up around this person, right? Um, and I'm not saying that like that was his intention, but I think we all have a subconscious desire, right? And I think he just wanted to be with me at like any means possible, and if that meant supplying me with drugs and alcohol and that would keep me somewhat satisfied,
Mm.
then he was willing to do it. So we had a very dysfunctional relationship for like a year and a half, maybe even 2 years. Um, so yeah, to answer your question, it was very easy to come by. Like it continued,
Yeah.
just straight up.
Well, and that, when that's something we want, I think it's pretty easy just to find that environment that we want to be in, whether it's through, one person or, we just, once you want that stuff and you get involved with it, you kind of get the sense of who does it, who doesn't, and you gravitate towards those who do, because
Absolutely.
you'll know you have access to it. And I remember I tried moving probably like 5, 6 times while I was in my addiction, because I always thought, oh, a new environment will help me get better. And then within a day, everywhere I went, I was around those same people again, doing the same thing because it's what I wanted and it's what I sought out, and so I found it. Um,
Totally.
so
Yeah.
as you went through that, did you, can you remember the first time that you started thinking, this is bad, this is like a little out of control, this is starting to negative affect me? Do you remember like that first time that those thoughts kind of started creeping in about your use, and then kind of how did you process that?
Yeah, 'cause like coming home, I would go party with, friends that I had here, and they were all very concerned
Mm.
about not only my relationship with this person, but obviously like how messed up I would get. Um, so I guess when they started expressing their concern, I started feeling like, okay, maybe I am going overboard, and then I would start making those like grand statements like, okay, I'll never drink that much again, or I'll only drink that I won't do drugs, or like, some version of that. But then like the following weekend, the same shit would happen again.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and then there would be stints where I would try to just not drink and say only do ecstasy, or like I don't know. It's all of these weird rules that you make for yourself to say it's not that bad. I'm not really an addict. Like I have things under control, but like yeah, I really couldn't get by without a substance. So yeah, like I guess there would be times when I would be able to be a little bit less messy, but yeah,
Yeah,
that was
I
kind of
yeah, I think that's kind of just on point with how life kind of goes when when you're using, right? And I can relate a lot to the, convincing myself, oh, okay, as long as I'm not using a needle, and
yeah.
injecting drugs into me, then I'm okay. I can take pills, I can trip, I can drink as much as I want, but I'm not using a needle, so I'm okay.
Hmm.
And I told myself that so many times, even though, eventually I would just end up right back to that. Anytime, I did get off of heroin for a little bit, I'd always end up right back to it within a matter of time. Um,
Yeah.
and just kind of with those relationships around you, I know, like, because I went to college on a soccer scholarship, and so I was in that realm of people that were working hard every day in class and on the field and everything like that. As I was getting worse and worse in my addiction, and if people weren't using like me, if people weren't just doing drugs like me, and if they started to express any kind of concern, I pushed them away. And I only
Yeah.
went with the people that were like, "Oh, you get fucked up, who cares?" Like, yeah, let's go. Let's go right now. And
Yeah.
so I lost a lot of relationships, and that as I was just constantly pushing people away. Did you have that experience of like when you started to lose people out of your life that meant something to you before, things started getting worse?
Um, I think like I'm trying to think what happened. I think I just went from like groups of friends to groups of friends. I and this might have been all in my head or it might have been true, but I mean like for me, I would just feel like eventually would wear out my welcome because I went so hard all the time. And maybe I was just exiting before I wore out my welcome, like before someone could say to me like, "Okay, it's a bit too intense here." Um and then eventually I did have two really, really good friends who were like true friends. Like they would stick it out with me no matter what. Like I could call them at 5 in the morning completely strung out and they would come get me. And then I'm getting emotional.
So
When they were like, this is getting to be too much. We actually didn't talk for a year. That was a huge wake up call for me. Because they were like not just party friends, they were like family. So yeah, that was a huge wake-up call for me. And then I had a year to hate them. But during that year, I actually had some realizations like, okay, maybe I'm at fault too. So that was the first time I came to any self-awareness. This was when I was 29. So this is 10 years into the addiction is when I finally was like, okay, maybe I need to make a change.
Yeah, and as you were starting to get that self-awareness, or maybe a little bit before, in the beginning of our conversation, you had said you didn't like to tell people about, your addiction and what was going on with you. Obviously, people can see it, but we don't always say it's a problem. We always just, we make up the excuses as we go. Was there moments you were able to start to be vulnerable and talk about what you were struggling with, whether that was the drug use itself or what you were struggling with internally that kind of drove that? Or did you still just keep all that stuff bottled up to yourself?
I had some friends at work that I trusted. They were a bit older, like 10 years older than me. And we were like a pretty tight-knit crew where, every day we would have lunch together and stuff like that. So they just saw me hungover all the fucking time. Um, and they were really kind. I mean, one of them, he was just like a dude. Like he just like, oh, wait, you want some Advil? Like he was just really supportive, and I would always be like, the post-coke anxiety where your brain is just going like crazy, and I just tell him all my thoughts. He's like, it's okay, don't worry about it. My other friend was actually someone that I would party with, so when I went to her and I'd say, I think I really have a problem, she'd be like, you don't have a problem because you have the same problem. So this was in my late 20s when I was starting to think like maybe I don't want to feel so shitty at work all the time. Because having a coke hangover at work it gets worse as you age as well. Like it's different when you're 24 than when you're 29. Yeah. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and and I ask that because it gets so exhausting, right? It gets
Yeah.
so tiring, and you kind of just went into it as well. Like as you as you rack up those years and things just start piling up or keep piling up, it's such an exhausting thing. Not only keeping all that in, but trying to just keep life afloat. Like you talked about going to work and dealing with that hangover, that coke hangover as you got older. If I was withdrawing or I couldn't find my dope, I went through so many jobs when I was using because I couldn't do that. I couldn't, I'd always be able to keep life together for I think 3 or 4 months, and then I'd end up having to bounce around or move or leave or something. And it becomes so exhausting, whether that's the emotion side of it or that physical side of it. Um, and you kind of just mentioned that self-awareness starts creeping in, right? We start maybe seeing some of our actions as our own, and the excuses maybe are a little bit harder to come up with and create. So as you started to kind of gain that self-awareness to it being a problem and maybe dealing with some of that exhaustion, was that where you started to let go of the coke, or was there like a rock bottom moment that it was done after that?
I don't think I ever had a rock bottom moment, like one rock
Yeah,
bottom moment.
yeah.
I think I had
There's
several.
many, yeah.
Um, yeah. And and then I would stop for a while and
Mhm.
then, maybe be clean for 3 months and think I'm like doing so good. And then I'll be drinking and then somebody will be like, hey, do you know where we can get some? And then I'll just start up again. Because you think like, well, I beat it last time. I bet this could just be a one-time thing.
It's never a one-time thing, right? Never.
No, it's not. It's the same shit with alcohol, right? Yeah, like I think some people like their neurochemistry can allow them to just like, yeah, it's a one-time thing for me. Like, did it? It was okay. For our brains that are like sponges for comfort, maybe because of the experiences that we had growing up, where like the pain is just, it just cuts so deep, that when we do find that external source of comfort, it's like Gabor Mate says, it's like someone walking through a desert for days and you hand them a glass of water. And for people whose neurochemistry isn't wired that way, it's like they're super hydrated and you hand them a glass of water. That's the difference.
I love that sponges for comfort.
Yeah.
I think that is a great way to kind of summarize our brains in those moments. I feel like that describes me perfectly, because even even after getting clean, I try to find those things that just gave me that quick comfort. That obviously maybe it wasn't drugs or alcohol, but it was something that like just gave that to me right away. And that is a huge healing process and working process to kind of let go of that needing to feel comfort right now, and being uncomfortable with my feelings and my emotions, and being able to process and feel those out. So I think that's so perfectly said. With that, did you know, like, the last time you did coke, like, this is my last time, or did you do it and then kind of stop for a little bit and then that stop just continued?
I did it, and then I was like, this doesn't even feel good anymore. What the fuck am I doing? And then the next morning, I was like, I think I'm done. I think I'm really done this time. Yeah. And I think it was because I had been doing yoga for about 6 months by that time. And my husband and I had just gone to Thailand, and then COVID hit in March 2020.
Mhm.
So we had to come back early, and and at that time, I think I hadn't done coke for maybe like a month and a half or something like that. But all of the anxiety of what was happening, and being in isolation, like quarantine after we came back, I think that just triggered something in me. So then I called my dealer. Um, and then I thought it would give me comfort, but it just made things worse.
Mm.
And I think it's because I had experienced true connection and peace while I had been doing the 6 months of yoga regularly. So then I actually had something to compare it to, like fake comfort and true peace. So something just didn't click in my brain. Like I was like, this is not the feeling that I'm actually going for. And so the following day, I think I don't want to do this anymore. And then what really held me to it was I told my sister, like the one person that I can never let down in my entire life. Like she's my baby sister. And I'm just like I only ever want to be a good role model for her. So I told her the truth. And I was like, I think I'm really going to quit this time. And I want you to hold me to it, because I know if by telling you, I'm going to stick with it. And I stuck with it.
Yeah, those words are so powerful when we can say them out loud to those people that will hold us accountable. I know that's been a big thing for me, is like setting that date and that moment of I'm done with this. Like, when you can share that with people you love, it's made me rethink maybe those moments where, like, oh, it'd be so easy to use right now, or it feels so good to use right now. But no, I made this promise to other people and myself, and so it just helps you kind of rethink that. But I know yoga and meditation is really big for you now, and you kind of using that to compare. What kind of got you first started? You said you've been doing it about 6 months. So was there something that pushed you into it, or is it something you were kind of interested in for a while? But what started, you know, working you down that avenue in your life?
Um, I was working in construction, so I was really stressed out all the time. Like my cortisol levels were insane. And I was holding a lot of tension in my body, and I could just feel it. Like I was trying to work it out at the gym, but everything was really tight, and I felt like I was going to injure myself soon. And so I said to a friend, "Hey, I'm really trying not to drink this month. Do you want to go out, but like not for drinks? Like go do something healthy." And so she's like, "Yeah, let's like we could try this, we could try this." I was like, "Oh, how about this place near my house? They have aerial yoga. I've always been curious." So we went and did an aerial yoga class. It was really fun. And they said if I signed up for a month, it would be like this deal. And I was like, "Oh, that's so cheap." And then obviously I was like, if it's unlimited, I'm going to go as much as possible to get
Yeah.
the So I tried like all of the classes, and the more I went, the more I got into it because it just felt so good for my body. And then I signed up for a year after the first month because I was like, I can tell this is good for me. I don't know why yet, but I just kept going to the studio like every day after work. It was like it's like a magnet just pulling my body towards it. And then I started being able to do things I never thought I would be able to do, which is like sit still for 5 minutes. um, and and not feel like I was gonna go crazy. And I owe it to obviously really good yoga teachers who could get me there. And that's why I'm so passionate now about teaching because I want to help other people realize that it's so attainable, this feeling of stillness and peace inside of us because your body and your mind actually wants it. It's fighting every day. It's stressed out every day because you're not allowing it,
I
right?
think that's super powerful with what you just said, and our body wants that calm and peace. Um, I know I convinced myself a long time that that was the most uncomfortable feeling in the world for me, is
Yeah.
calm and peace. And I
Mhm.
loved I mean, it wasn't just the drugs or the feelings. It becomes, you get addicted to that lifestyle of everything being fast and crazy and
Yeah.
drama and just the intensity that comes with using. Um,
Yeah.
and that's what I was comfortable in. I was comfortable in constantly being in fight mode,
Mm.
constantly being in high alert because I had to figure out how I'm going to get high today. I had to figure out how I'm going to dodge somebody today. I had to figure all that out 24/7, and um, being being uncomfortable in that peace. I think in today's world is pretty common, because I mean everybody's getting to be wired to where everything's got to be so fast, and we always got to be doing something. And I think that's a really big powerful point of yoga and meditation. It's just being able to calm that. And I think that's probably a huge part of getting you there is finding that passion, right? I think passion in our lives and finding that can be a big difference maker in trying to be better and trying to heal, is because we have something we love. And so I love hearing that your path into that and your journey into that. um so was that something, like, after you got off the coke, is that something you continued in pretty intensely? And then, you talked about wanting to teach it, and then I know that's what you put your work into now. But what kind of got you to that point of making more out of it instead of just going to the classes?
For sure, like, I mean, during COVID, I just craved getting out of the house, being among other people. Like, we need community. We need the energy of other people, the support of other people. And I'm so grateful that I had the gym and then I had the yoga studio that I could still go to. So it just became my lifeline. Like, this all happened in 2020, and then in 2021 was when I signed up to do my yoga teacher training. Um, and I think every time I tried to quit Coke before, it didn't work because I didn't have something that felt as good as Coke to replace it. And so naturally, I'm going to like run back to it, right? And then this time I did have something like a much more worthy replacement. And I think to be successful at any type of major change, especially if it's something that's been in your life for 14 years, it's got to be something that you feel is worthy of your time, your effort, your attention, your love. It's like I lucked out because it's something that's amazing for both the body and the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with finding something to replace that feeling. I was actually just talking to somebody the other day about passion, and when we find that in our life, it just does so much, because it can change our perspective. It can help us get through tough times. It can, like you said, with something like yoga, it treats the body and the mind. And so when we can find something that does that for us in our lives, it feels amazing. And I thought that was drugs for the longest time. And as I got clean and I started finding these different things, or I went back to being able to be involved in soccer through coaching, or just enjoying it again, and kind of finding different ways to help people, became a real big passion of mine. And that always felt good. It didn't matter if I was tired, if I was exhausted. I could always go and do those things and feel amazing while I was doing it, and then afterwards as well. So I think that's so powerful in trying to grow in our lives, and trying to be happy. And so you said you did the teaching thing. I believe you said you went to Thailand to do that. Is that correct?
I did my 200-hour training here, and then I
Okay.
did my 300 training in Thailand.
Okay. Yeah. And so what was that experience like becoming a teacher? So now, not only are you using your passion just to make you happy, but you're gaining a knowledge to then give it to other people. So what was that experience like, and how did that kind of alter your mindset about how you approached it? And then kind of going back into the addiction side of it, how did alcohol and cannabis play a role in that time period?
So when I was doing my 200-hour training, I was still drinking. And when we were learning about yoga philosophy, it's so interesting because the poses that we do is only one out of the 8 limbs of yoga. The other 7 limbs are really about cultivating morals and principles within yourself, morals and principles towards others, learning how to control your breath, learning how to withdraw your senses from the outside world, learning how to concentrate and focus and lead yourself into a meditative state. And then eventually the goal of yoga is actually to achieve samadhi, which some people call nirvana.
Mm.
So when I learned about all of this, I was like, I started to see how my drinking behavior led me away from all of this. It was almost like, okay, I'm getting closer, and then I drink, and then it would just like pull me back down again from this state that I knew I wanted to be in, which was a state of peace. So I just started again, it was the feeling this versus this, right? True peace versus fake comfort or fake fun, because alcohol has both. Fake comfort and fake fun. So then when I went to Thailand to do my training, as soon as I stepped on the plane, I was like, I don't want to drink anymore. And I don't want to smoke weed anymore, because it was the same thing. It gave me a fake sense of peace. But really, like, I was so dumb when I was high. Like, I couldn't articulate my words. I couldn't remember anything. I could watch like an entire movie, and the next day I couldn't tell you what that movie was about. Like, it was terrible. And I'd been smoking weed for like 8 years, right? Because it's so acceptable in Canada. Like, yeah, that's another conversation. But yeah, I was just like, I don't want to be so far away from myself anymore. And And then I started noticing my thoughts without alcohol and weed and how anxious they were. And I think this had a lot to do with the withdrawals from these substances too. And then I realized while I was doing my 300-hour training and we were like just meditating all the time and doing yoga all the time, that this whole journey and exercise is like a practice of thought replacement. Like being aware of what thoughts you have and then choosing to replace those thoughts with other thoughts. Not like, oh, this is a negative thought, I'm going to squish it down and have a positive thought instead. Like, not like that, but actually like conversing with your thoughts. Like, okay, you're having this thought. What makes you feel like you need to entertain this thought? Or how is this thought true? Or how is this thought helpful? How is this thought kind? And if it's not kind, then why are you entertaining it? Why are you letting it dwell within you? Because this energy is just going to transmute and emanate from you, right? Like how we treat ourselves is how we treat others. And yeah, it was like 300 hours of this type of talk with myself. And that was my rehab, essentially. So again, yoga really helped me there because I had this background of knowledge, this education, and I was teaching it to others, which helps reinforce that knowledge within you. And you feel like a real hypocrite if you're teaching it to others and not practicing it yourself. So, yeah.
But I think that the whole thought process you just kind of walked us through is so valuable, and doing hundreds of hours of that of practicing that and working on it. I just could imagine how beneficial it is, because just hearing a couple of the phrases that you use with I really like the not just replacing a negative thought with a positive thought, because eventually that negative thought's just going to keep coming back. But when you can kind of work through it, like you just talked about, I think that's where that real change can happen. And we gain a better understanding of where those thoughts come from and why we entertain them. And I think that's a really powerful tool to use in recovery, or just trying to get better, or be a better person in any aspect of life. As you let those things go, so the coke, the weed, the alcohol, and obviously you were transitioning to a new life with yoga and meditation and being super involved with that. But was there any hesitation, or were there thoughts of letting go of a part of you that became such a huge part of you, like the partying, the drugs, alcohol? Was that tough for you to kind of let go of and say that old me is, I got to move past it?
It was very hard. It was like a year-long grieving process, to be honest. And I think that's why I couldn't quit drinking even after I had quit coke, because it was so attached to who I thought I was and my identity and my relationship with my husband, because we've been together for 14 years. So when we met, we were both in active addiction, right? So when I said I was going to be sober, I had no idea what that would do to us. And it was really scary the first few months, just navigating that and having very difficult conversations about, are we going to stay together? When I've changed so much in the past couple of years, my beliefs have changed, my actions, my behavior, all of that, right? And then my friend group completely changed. So I couldn't hang out with the people that I used to hang out with. Just being around people who drank gave me severe anxiety. So all of that, like the first year was the hardest. And I think that's why a lot of people go back to old habits. It's why I kept going back to old habits, right? Because it's hard to lose people, especially when what got us into addiction was that this is going to help me connect with people. So at the beginning, when you start losing people, it's like, okay, this is fulfilling the prophecy that if I don't drink it and if I don't use, I'm going to be alone. But what ended up happening was I started making a lot of friends at the yoga studio. A lot of the people that would come to my classes were just really genuinely nice people, and a lot of them were sober. So I would tell them like, hey, I'm newly sober and I'm looking for people to do sober things with. So we would go for walks, we'd go for coffee, and then I found connection that way, which then proved to myself that, okay, this isn't it. This isn't the end. I don't have to be alone just because I chose a different life for myself. In fact, there's a new life that I can create that seems a whole lot more genuine and enriching than the life I had before. And then it just kept going up and up and up from there, which then helped build my confidence and get rid of my anxiety as a sober person. And after that first year, everything just got a whole lot easier, I think.
I think with what you just said is something everybody in recovery or getting clean should listen to. Because we always talk about that beginning feeling so good because we're off drugs and like we feel again and all this. But what you just said about the isolating factor or the having to change and grieve, you said that was like a year-long grieving process. And I stayed connected to that identity for so long because that's who I was. I was this party person. I did hard drugs. I was, just everything everybody had said about me when it come to drug use. I was like, yep, that's me. And I accepted that. And I chose that and took that as my identity. And, I think that conversation is really important because I think that can be a big reason we go back out. Because I know whenever I got off hard drugs, it's why I just went right back to them because I was like, you know what, I'm destined for death or prison by a certain age because this is just who I am. And I think you have to grieve that. You have to grieve letting go of something that was you. And so I think that's such a powerful message to people approaching that and thinking, oh, things are going to get better right away. Yeah. not always when you start to change that, especially internally, it can be really conflicting. Yeah. But as you put together this clean time now, and I like how you talked about how first year was tough, but things have just been going up and up and up, and the finding a better life without drugs and building those connections without drugs is such a powerful thing in sobriety and in life because you realize it wasn't the drugs, it's you, and there's something in you that can build those relationships. You don't have to do it under the influence. But have you had any like really tough moments that you can think about where you were like, oh, this is hard. Can I get through this and still stay on my path?
Like I never had any more alcohol cravings or drug cravings after I came back from Thailand. Maybe because I had my practice. So it was something I could return to. Like it gave me a very solid foundation. I felt steady in myself. I knew that there was a lot of stuff that I had to heal and confront that I had been pushing away with alcohol and drugs. So one of those things was deep trauma with my parents. And so in December of last year, so pretty much a year after I quit drinking, I finally had the courage to confront them. And it was like in the form of a family meeting. And it was extremely hard. But that ultimately helped me fully heal. Like that was like the last step that I needed to happen. And from then on, like even though that blew everything up and like it opened the wound like, wide open. I mean, the wound was always there, but it was just like kind of festering with lots
Yeah.
of shit piled up on top of it. But now it's like, okay, all the shit's been lifted, it's wide open, and then now we've cleaned out the wound, and now it can actually start to heal. So, yeah, since December of last year till I guess June, I didn't speak with my dad. And then I finally forgave him and I went to see him for Father's Day. But that was probably like the hardest moment that I've had in sobriety. And no part of me wanted to numb it. And my sister was there. She was so supportive. And I had my counselor who helped me write the letter that I needed to write. And I think also because 6 months after sobriety, I started school as a life coach.
Mhm.
So I got tons of counseling in that program.
Yeah.
Like we really helped each other out with a lot of stuff. So I did a lot of healing within my program as well. So I think all the steps that I took were all very conducive to helping me stay in sobriety. I never questioned it. And then it helped me continue to heal.
I think that's a great analogy. Talking about a wound festering and not being able to heal, but once you clean it out and you clean it up, then you give it that opportunity. I think that's a great analogy, in that type of way, and just talking about the support you had in that is so big, which is why it's so important to lean on people when we need to, and to have people there for us when something might be tough. And that can be such a huge tool in getting us through those moments without even having cravings, but going back out, or maybe it's not even drugs, maybe it's just some self-destructive behavior that we go into when things get uncomfortable or tough. And so I think that's really powerful, and you sharing that, and facing something that was huge and traumatic for you, and taking some time to go back to it and start to heal from it, but being able to do that is a really powerful message. And it's not easy to do those things, but it's so important to do them if we can. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And just like kind of as we get closer to kind of wrapping up our conversation, I know you've kind of sprinkled a little bit in talking about yoga and meditation and what it can do for you. But what are like one or two of the biggest things that you take from it yourself, or that you hope other people take from yoga and meditation, in the sense of, just for their own peace?
I think the most important piece of it is it leads you back to yourself, because we're so conditioned to please other people. So at some point as we're growing up, we stop being ourselves. We're just this version that other people have layered, like with their rules and their expectations. So we have like all these layers sitting on top of us that's not revealing truly who we are. And then in order to deal with that fake self that we present to the outer world, we need coping mechanisms such as drugs, alcohol, shopping, gambling, sex, porn, devices, anything, right? Anything to numb out the fact that you're not speaking from a place of truth, and you're not acting in a way that's actually how you want to live your life. Like, think of all the people who are in a job that they hate just because their parents wanted them to do it. Or even people, like I see this all the time, people who start families, not because they themselves wanted kids, but they think this is the norm, and then they have to follow what everybody else is doing in order to be accepted or to belong. And then this is why so many people end up in divorces and midlife crises, right? Like, so what yoga and meditation did for me was lead me back to myself. So I stopped living a life that wasn't authentic to me. And how that happens is when you learn to sit with yourself, you learn to converse with yourself without wanting to run away anywhere because you're comfortable with yourself. Like, you've learned through being still in a yoga pose that you can do this. And when you show yourself you can do something one time, you're going to build that confidence to repeat it over and over and over again, especially if it feels good. And then the same thing with meditation. At first, it's super uncomfortable because you're like, I know this sucks, like all the voices that are incoming. But then you learn to see those voices as not part of you, but just something that you're witnessing. And when you can differentiate who you are and what your thoughts are, that's where you start to feel really powerful and you start to feel really in control of your life. And when you feel in control of your life, you're unstoppable.
That is the best pitch or selling point I've ever heard for yoga and meditation. Because I think that's like, I really like that you talked about just as we grow up, and as you were saying that, I was thinking about that, of, you know, when somebody said something to me and how that would put a new pressure or expectation or something I was supposed to do or a way I was supposed to act, or, you know, and you know, especially, you know, then as a male and growing up in the South, there's some different things. Like, I just remember people made me hate soccer because it was called the foot fairy growing up, because that's, you know, it was football and baseball if you were a guy growing up, and it just adds that to our lives. And I think that's so powerful of talking about leading back to yourself. And I think that's such a great, I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? Right? Who wouldn't want to peel back some of those layers and be authentic, like you just said, be authentic to themselves, and just be able to live life without having to feel like you got to do things for other people or present your way for other people.
It's really cool because when you start living authentically and you're attracting people into your life who really want to be friends with you, that's the best feeling because you know that they actually want to be friends with you. Like, you're showing them who you are truly, and they're like, I want more of that. And that's the best feeling ever. That is way better than, okay, I need to be drunk or high for some people will like me, because then that's the condition, right? Like, and we're conditioned to believe in conditional love. Yeah, if you can teach yourself unconditional love for yourself, that reflects into everything in your life. And then you're free.
I love that. I think that's that's a great way to look at that, and just when you can feel those genuine relationships, it does feel so good. You know, there was people, you know, we text or call each other, hey, you got drugs? No, okay, well, we'll talk to you next time you got some. And people did that to me, I did that to other people, and so it's just, you know, it's relationships with all those little conditions into it. And when you don't have that, it feels genuine, it feels great, it makes you feel good about yourself, which in turn just can make you feel genuinely good about other people. Because when you have that genuine love and appreciation for yourself, then you can do that genuinely for those around you, and obviously that's always going to make a relationship more positive and healthier. So I really appreciate your time, and, you know, your sharing your journey and the vulnerability and just the good tidbits of advice and perspective in there. I think there was a lot that I enjoyed listening to and taking away from you. And there's a really powerful thing I like doing about this is, you know, we're from two different backgrounds, grew up in two different places, and I could say some of the exact same things you said about what you struggle with and those feelings inside, which, you know, just proves your point in what you said in the very beginning of our conversation. So I really appreciate that. And I always like to let the person I have on, share one last bit of advice or just a perspective or just say, whatever you want to say to close out the conversation. But um, just one more thing you wanna share or say before we end our time together?
Sure. Well, my website is stillyoga.ca. I write a weekly blog. Um, and I guess I just want to say to everyone that the most amazing thing about you is you.
And I'm going to put your links in the description. So definitely go, check out the website, Instagram, any other platforms that you're on. Um, it's positive and it's real and it's authentic and it's great pieces of advice to live by. So thank you again so much for coming on. I thought it was a great conversation. I really appreciate your time. So thank you one more time.
Thank you, Brandon.
It's been Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.